If you happened to make it to church last Sunday, then you might have heard the news. Jesus, who was killed on the cross, went and got up from the dead. The women were there. They saw the angels, they raced back and told the other disciples, and you might remember the others dismissed what they were saying as a, quote, idle tale. Except Peter. He didn't go along with the crowd. Something in Peter had to go back and check it out for himself. Well, later that same evening, 2 of the disciples left Jerusalem and were heading to the village of Emmaus. They could have been husband and wife. They could have been heading home. We don't know. We do know they were entirely dismayed. Whenever there is death, there is grief. And whenever there is grief, there is guilt. And at one point, these 2 stop walking and stand still, looking sad. When a stranger approaches and begins walking with them, they tell him, "See, we had hoped. We had hoped Jesus would be the Messiah who would come and set Israel free. We believed in him, and he let us down." That's what they say out loud. What they don't say, but they might as well have, is that Jesus believed in us, and we let him down. We had hoped that he would save us, and he sure didn't. And we didn't save him either. Now you and I know what these 2 disciples don't. That stranger who's come to walk beside them, that's Jesus. And it could be there is something in us that wishes Jesus would have burst onto the scene in a cloud of glory with a Shazam and a hallelujah. Jesus would look at these 2 disciples of the year over here and he would shake his head. How dare you doubt the women when they were telling the truth? How dare you doubt that I'm the real Messiah? He would demand. And in Luke's version, Jesus really does start down this path. He tells those 2, "How foolish are you? How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared." So at least that's something. But I don't know. We can imagine how these 2 disciples are feeling guilty, how they kind of were guilty. They didn't stay awake with Jesus in the garden. They didn't protest when he was getting shouted to death by the crowd. And it's hard to admit. But what if there is something in us that wants Jesus to get in their face, to repair the harm of injustice? He would say to them, "You're worried you let me down? You should be. You did." And what if we kind of want Jesus to say this out loud? Because this keeps being the problem. All through the gospel, Jesus keeps forfeiting opportunities to call out people for their participation in evil. Why isn't he shaming them for their sin? This is what the religious leaders keep asking. Jesus goes to dinner with tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes like it's no big thing at all. I invite you to think of a political group that offends you to your core. Now imagine Jesus showing up at their rally. And instead of ripping the flag off the stage, and yes, I mean that flag, whichever flag that is, instead of confronting their leaders and accusing them of oppression, you know what Jesus does? He unfolds a chair and cracks open a beer like he's got nowhere else to be. This is Jesus, and he is hanging out with them, and it's a problem. It's a problem because we think we know, and we do not know. We don't get it. And I'm sorry, Jesus is the hero of our faith. We're expecting him to show up with the judgment that will make things right. And instead, Jesus shows up with grace, if you can believe that. I recently heard an interview that won't let go of me. It's from the Braver Angels podcast, and I will include the link to this interview on the sermon manuscript on the church website. So if you go to the church website, find the sermon manuscript, you'll be able to click on this link. 1 year ago, in April of 2020, there was a protest in Nashville against the coronavirus restrictions. And you might have seen the famous photograph from this rally. It features a woman holding a sign that reads, "Sacrifice the weak, reopen Tennessee." Now, when the songwriter Thomas Prasada Rao saw this picture on social media, it cut him to the quick. He had been undergoing treatment for cancer and was immunocompromised. He was, very literally, the weak. The sign was talking about him. This woman holding the sign was talking about him. So he thought, what would make her create such a sign? And then he did what he does, and he wrote her a song. And the lyrics of the chorus go like this: "Whoever you are, whatever you've done, it's nothing that you can't overcome. Whatever it is that you're going through, even so, even now, even you." Now, in talking about this song, Prasada Rao reveals a trade secret that is true for preachers and songwriters alike. He says, no matter what the writer says, it is always a song about themselves. It's a song to themselves. And he explained that the song he was singing to this sign-holding woman is exactly the song he wanted somebody from the other side to be singing to him. It seems like the first problem is Jesus comes to walk beside the very people that we can't stand. Despite our misgivings, Jesus offers them compassion. And maybe that's not even the problem. Maybe that's the miracle. The other problem is that Jesus comes to walk beside us. And despite our misgivings, Jesus offers us compassion, and you see where this is going. And maybe that's not even the problem. Maybe that's the miracle. But this grace, it is so hard to accept. We just don't get it. It's like there's something in us that wishes Jesus would burst onto the scene and render a verdict, but you know Jesus. Put your sword back, he tells us. Here, sit down, he tells us. Let me get you something to eat. Sometimes in Christian circles, you'll hear a certain worry rise up, and it goes like this. We can't let God's forgiveness become a kind of cop-out. We have a firework and some strong opinions from the dog on this too. The worry goes, what are we supposed to invoke the grace of God in order to let people off the hook? We can't turn a blind eye to evil. And when I hear people worry about this, my first thought is, there is a lot of that's right. We can't turn a blind eye to evil, but that's not what forgiveness is. In my 13 years of ministry, I can tell you this. I have never seen the problem of people walking around believing they are too magnificently forgiven. If that's a problem, I sure haven't seen it. The problem I see is exactly the opposite. The common worry that taunts us, that the bravest ones say out loud, it goes like this. Am I a good person? Which might really mean, am I a good enough person? Which might really mean, surely the Lord is coming to judge me, and God will be harsh, and God will be right. And the church can go on and say all kinds of nice things about forgiveness, but I don't know. When it comes to forgiveness, we don't get it until we do. And it really might take us the whole walk to the faraway village. It might take us our whole lives to believe. But the truth is this. You are more forgiven than you know. I am more forgiven than I know. Grace is the very power of God, and there is more grace than we can comprehend. There is always more grace than we know. I promise. Imagine what it must have been like for those two disciples. I mean, when they set out to go to Emmaus, they are devastated. They are more than a little angry that Jesus had failed them. He was supposed to be the Messiah, and he went off and got himself killed. The disciples were more than a little ashamed that they had failed Jesus. And maybe we can relate. Here we are heading down the road when a stranger comes along, intruding on our sorrow. You know, Christ has a knack for meeting up with us at the worst time. He should be calling us out. He knows our shame. He should love us with the fierceness that won't let us get away with evil. Jesus knows all the ways that we are exactly not worthy. So this is where there should be the fight. This is the moment of reckoning. Where is the thunder? Where is the terrible swift sword? And it turns out Jesus is just going to hang out with us. Like he's got nowhere else to be. Sure, he says, let's go inside. I will stay for dinner. And he looks at us with eyes of love and pours the drinks and says the grace. And can you imagine if we got it? The forgiveness we never saw coming came and hunted down the very people we can't stand, but it found us too. It came right into the house. And imagine if our hearts got broken and the bread got broken and our eyes were opened, our own forgiveness got poured out. Forgiveness you were harboring in your soul you didn't even know you had. Our cup runneth over. Whoever you are, whatever you've done, it's nothing that you can't overcome. Whatever it is that you're going through, even so, even now, even you. Whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, there is a word of grace that you are needing to hear. And oh, my friends, there is also a word of grace that somebody you know needs to hear. Get spoken out loud. May it be so.